Good morning, everybody. Good to see you today. And today we're going to continue in the book of Esther. It's one of the books that was requested that we study. And this is the first time I've done a series of sermons on the book of Esther. We're in our third week in Esther now. And we're in chapter 3. And I just want to remind you of some of the background to this story. And I'm going to repeat myself from a couple weeks ago, but I do want to remind you of the background. There was the Hebrew people, 12 tribes, and they eventually settled in the land of Canaan, and they formed one nation. Now, this wasn't a nation as we think of nations today. Back in those days, there was no such thing as nations in the same sense that we have today. But we call it the nation of Israel just because that's the words we have to use. So they formed one nation, a kind of confederation of 12 tribes. And we call that the nation of Israel. Now, around 900 BC, that confederation of tribes split and had a civil war. They couldn't decide who they wanted to be their king after King Solomon passed away. And so part of the tribes went with one king and part of the tribe went with another king. So there was a sort of like a civil war, and the nation of Israel split in two. And the northern nation was called Israel, and the southern nation was called Judah. And that's where Jerusalem was located. So we had this huge split. Well, as other empires rose up in the area, they would attack Israel, or they would attack Judah and try to take over their land. So the first nation that came up and did this successfully was the nation of Assyria. And it's a big empire, the Assyrian Empire, and they are known for their cruelty. And they conquered the northern part of the nation called Israel in 722 BC. So the northern Israel was taken away and conquered by the Assyrians. And there's actually in the record of archaeology carvings of showing the Assyrians taking Israelis captive. So once again, the archaeology proves what the Bible tells us. The Bible is not just a bunch of myths and stories. It's a historically accurate record of the history of the Hebrew people. So that was in 722 BC. So now you got left is Judah, which is a much smaller nation. And the Assyrians actually tried to conquer Judah. But you might remember this story from church when you were young or whatever. Remember the story how an army was coming in to attack Judah, and they were camping out at night outside the city walls, and God sent an angel, and the angel killed 82,000 soldiers and saved the people of Jerusalem and saved the nation of Judah. Well, that army that was surrounding them that had 82,000 killed by the angel was Assyria. So Assyria conquered the northern nation of Israel. They tried to conquer Judah, but God didn't let them. And then it was years later, in 586 BC, that another great kingdom arose called Babylon. And Babylon went in and successfully conquered Judah. So that southern kingdom called Judah was also conquered. And then, eventually, the Persians, and they call that the Medo-Persian Empire, they conquered the Babylonians, and they took over everything. Now that's the setting that we have for the story of Esther. Esther was a Jewish woman, young lady, probably young teen, probably in the story teenager. And she was about 4 generations deep into living in this area of Persia and Babylon. There have been about 4 generations of Jewish people that came before her. So to her, Persia was her home. She had never been to Israel, and she didn't have any desire to return there. She lived in Persia her whole life. And that's the country today that we call Iran, that she was living in. So it's kind of very contemporary in our thoughts about the nation of Iran and the nation of Israel. So she grew up there, she lived there, and that's what was her home. And she was an orphan. She didn't have any parents. They passed away when she was very young. But her cousin, who was older than her, called Mordecai, he raised her up as if she was his own daughter. He took really good care of her. And she turned out to be very good. She turned out to be extremely beautiful and also had a great personality, wisdom, and intellect. And people loved her and were amazed by her everywhere she went and everything she did. Now, we found out last week that her uncle Mordecai did something really good to help him get along in the Persian Empire. Mordecai heard two eunuchs plotting to kill the king. Two eunuchs were angry at the king, and they were going to kill King Ahasuerus. And Mordecai heard about this. So he exposed this plot to the king. And the king had these two guys sprung up and killed. So Mordecai had done something very, very important, saved the king's life. And we learned about that last week. Now, this book of Esther, it's a very complicated story. If you read it, it's like half a dozen little sub-stories, things that happen, and all added up together into one big story. So now we're going to find out the next thing about the story, about a man named Haman. Haman was not a good person. He was anti-Semitic. He hated the Jews. He wanted to kill all the Jews. And he came up with a plot to do that. So we're going to learn about that today. Now I'm in chapter 3. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman. Motorcycles. He promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. So this guy named Haman was promoted to the highest level of power in the Persian Empire, next to the king himself. And it says that Haman was an Agagite. Well, if you know what that means, you look at the ancestry of Haman, the nation that he came from was enemies to the Jews for centuries. And they hated the Jews. And Haman seemed to carry this old hatred into his own life, right there in the Persian Empire. So Haman was promoted. All the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. So this guy was so powerful that the king made us a written statement that everyone must bow down to him. So if Haman comes along on his horse or walking around town, the capital was called Susa, the town he lived in was called Susa, the capital of the Persian Empire. You had to bow down to him. Well, Mordecai, being a good Jewish person, was not going to bow down to a political leader. God never wants us to bow down to another human being. He doesn't want us to bow down to a political leader, to a sports figure, to an artist, a musician. God wants us to only bow down to him, his son Jesus Christ, and the Lord our God. It's the only one we bow down to. So Mordecai refused to bow down. So here's this guy going around town, everybody's bowing down, and here's this one dude standing there with a strong look on his face, just like, I'm not doing this. So they all bowed down and paid homage to homage, for the king had so commanded. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" And they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. So his friends were all telling him, "You need to bow down, dude. Well, why are you standing there? What's your point you're trying to prove? You're going to get killed. You're going to be put to death. You got to stop doing this. You got to bow down with the rest of us." But with all that pressure on him from society, all the peer pressure, all his friends telling him to bow down to a human being, Mordecai would not do it. Because Mordecai's faith was in God and God alone. And that's a message for all of us today, that we only bow down to our Lord and God and our Savior Jesus Christ. So they spoke to him every day, but Mordecai would not listen to them. For Mordecai had actually told them that he was a Jew. And you might remember that Mordecai told Esther, don't let the people know that you're Jewish. So Esther was able to become the queen by keeping the secret that she was Jewish. But Mordecai had told people that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So they made known to him the people of Mordecai. Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. So Haman is so angry, he doesn't want to only get rid of Mordecai, but he wants to kill all of Mordecai's people. He was already anti-Semitic. He was already descended from the Amalekites, the people that hated the Jews and fought the Jews for centuries. He was very angry because he was so full of pride and so full of himself. And he wanted everybody to agree with him, everybody to bow down to him. He not only wanted to kill Mordecai, but all of Mordecai's people throughout the kingdom. Now remember how large this kingdom was. This kingdom was in northern Africa. It was in the Middle East. It stretched all the way to India. It was a very large kingdom, and it had 127 different provinces. So Mordecai wants to get rid of all the Jews throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. So now I'm in verse 7. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that's P-U-R, before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month till the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. All right, so what's happening here? It's a little confusing. Haman's making a plot to kill the Jews, and he's going to pick out a day for this to happen. So he's kind of rolling dice, so to speak, casting lots, kind of like rolling dice, to find out what the best day is to kill all the Jews. And the day he comes up with is about a year later. So there's about a year in between where his plot gets hatched and when they actually have the day they're going to try to kill all Jewish people. And you notice they called the casting of the lots Pur. You've heard of the Jewish holiday called Purim? Well, Purim refers to how they cast the lots and plan to kill the Jews. And it's a celebration of how Queen Esther saved her people. Queen Esther saved the Jews from being slaughtered, which we'll get to in later chapters. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws. So it is not to the king's province to tolerate them." So as usual, when someone hatches a plot, they'll tell lies, and a good lie always contains some element of truth, right? It sounds believable, but they're leaving things out. They're not saying certain things. Haman is not telling the king that his beautiful queen that he loves so much, named Esther, is one of these people that he's going to seek to be destroyed. He's not telling the king that these are the Jewish people he's seeking to destroy. He just told the king, there are certain people, a certain group of people, and their laws they're teaching is against the laws that you're teaching. They are rebels against your kingdom, and they need to be put to death. And you remember when Jesus was on trial, they accused him of the same thing. They told the Roman authorities that Jesus claims to be a king, and that Jesus is teaching things contrary to Roman law. And of course that was not really exactly true either. So here they use half-truths, and they accuse the Jews basically, without naming them, sort of as an insurrection. If it please the king, let it be decreed that these people be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who are in charge of the king's business, that they may put it in the treasuries. So he's saying to the king, you need to kill every one of these people. And when you do this, I'm going to put a bunch of silver in the king's treasury. And the amount of silver he was offering the king was 350 tons. That's a lot of wealth in silver. And where was he planning to get this silver from? Because they were going to kill the Jews and take all their possessions. And remember, these Jews were scattered all over the empire. So it's going to be a lot of silver taken, a lot of gold, a lot of riches taken from those they had killed. So he's going to kill all the Jews, take all their possessions, take the silver and give it to the king as a bribe. But the king didn't really need to be bribed. The king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money is given to you, the people also. Do with them as seems good to you. So the king didn't accept that bribe. He didn't really need it. But he said, go ahead, do what you think is right. Go ahead and kill all these people. And go ahead and rob all these people of their possessions. And if that seems like the right thing to do, I trust you, Haman. You're my right-hand man. Go ahead and do it. Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satraps and to the governors over all the provinces, and to the officials of all the people, every province in its own language and script. It was written in the name of King Assyrius and sealed with the king's signet ring. So the king had given his signet ring to Haman, which is a lot of power to hand somebody. And they sent out to every province. Now remember, these people did not all speak the same language. These were people from various different cultures. These were Africans, these were Middle Easterns, these were people from India that were under this empire. So they made this message, this edict, go out. And they did it in every language, in every dialect of all the people. So they had to pull together a bunch of scribes who could write in different languages to send these messages out to everybody. And it was sent all over the kingdom. That was a big job. Good thing they had a year to get it done. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the instructions to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. So they're not just going to kill the men, they're going to kill the women and the children too. And that's a terrible thing when warfare goes beyond just two armies fighting each other, and they start killing civilians, and they start killing babies, and they start killing women and children. That's a grotesque sin in the eyes of God to fight a war of that type. Women and children, all in one day on that month of Adar. Verse 14. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation to all the people to be ready for that day. The couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa citadel, and the king and Haman sat down to drink. But the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. So these powerful men, these rulers of the kingdom, they make this terrible edict to kill everybody. And what do? As soon as the edict goes out and everybody gets the message to kill all the Jews, they got together and had a drink. They did a lot of drinking back in those days. They were just partying, celebrating, enjoying themselves, not caring that thousands and thousands of men, women, and children were going to be slaughtered, all on a certain day. And you notice, they didn't say the Persian army was going to do this. We'll find out as we read on that just the everyday person living in these towns would be allowed to have weapons and kill all the Jews in their town, all that they knew. So this was a horrible thing that was done. But Haman had deceived the king. He didn't tell the king, these are the Jewish people we're going to kill. He didn't tell the king, your wife Esther that you love is Jewish, your queen, and she'll be killed as well. It was all part of his plot. And all because he was angry, because his ego was bruised, because Mordecai would not bow down and worship him. So they're really in a fix. Now, there's always a good message for our lives when we read the Bible. You know, we don't have to stand up against an edict like this. Not now, in these days. We don't have to worry about persecution like people have worried in the past. God has given us a lot of freedom where we live to worship Him freely without fear. I'm not afraid of being here today. Are you? But if the day was to come, let's just say they came and said, next Sunday we're going to send troops in, and because you're Christians, we're going to take you away and put you in prison. We're going to arrest your pastor and maybe put him to death for preaching the Bible. If that day was to come, what would you do? Would you still come to church? Would you still be here? I know sometimes people let small things keep them from church. Well, I don't know, I'm a little tired, or I don't know, maybe I'll go to the beach. I don't know, maybe I'll clean the house a little bit, and I won't go to church. So we let the littlest things keep us from being here sometimes. And it makes me wonder what's going to happen someday if there is a serious persecution of Christians in our world, in our country. How many of us are going to hold on? What about when they offer us the mark of the beast? And they tell us, if you don't take this mark of the beast, you cannot buy or sell anything. Can you imagine that, if you could not buy or sell anything? If you don't take the mark of the beast, how many of us are going to take that mark? And we let such little things keep us from serving God even now. How can we expect to survive at the end times when we are seriously being persecuted? So my hope is that each one here is growing spiritually, and that we're growing stronger. It's done through prayer. It's done through Bible study. It's done through attending church. It's done through spending time with Christian friends. We've got to be strong, and we've got to be courageous. Like Esther risked her life. And when Esther went before the king, risking her life, her statement was this: if I die, I die. Remember a few weeks ago in the book of Acts, we studied the Apostle Paul. He was going to Jerusalem, and they told him, don't go to Jerusalem, you're going to be arrested, you might be killed. And Apostle Paul said, don't you understand? I don't care if they kill me. I don't care. Because he was so convinced of the gospel of Jesus Christ, because he had a personal relationship. And I hope everybody here today has a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, because if you don't, you're never going to take a stand for Christ when the hard times come. And as always, I want to invite anyone who wants to come up and pray with me today. If you've never received Christ into your heart, this is the day to do it, to start that personal relationship with Jesus Christ. So if you'd like to come up and pray with me today, now is the time. It's coming up.